Alright, here. Let's take a look at a few popular, well-received games, right? This is how they open. Neon White opens like this.
We're called neons. Sinners plucked from hell to do God's dirty work.
Like, I think there's an obvious winner here. Okay, so plot summary time. The game basically starts out with a cool animated intro telling you the game's premise. I'm not going to show you that and will instead basically paraphrase it in a manner that's not as fun to watch or engaging in the slightest. Basically, you're White, an emo twink from hell who's been called back to life because he murders people real good, and surprisingly, most of the people in heaven aren't actually murderers, obsessed with violence, or generally able to fight demons too good. This is a bad thing, as the kingdom of heaven is being invaded by a demonic force. Supposedly, he was just hanging out with his Twitter mutuals, until one day when God came down from the sky and said, "You've ye your last ha, motherfucker," and struck him in his oomfies with lightning or whatever. Now he's been granted another shot at life and a spot in heaven as long as he can go 10 days without posting cringe and beat all the other neons in a demon-slaying competition called the 10 Days of Judgment. So, unlike a lot of the other games I've made videos on thus far, I actually played Neon White for the first time quite recently, which was back in September 2023. That was 15 months ago. Alright. So, ignoring the fact that the last year of my life seemingly disappeared and is now nothing more than a collage of wasted time, existential dread, and poor decisions, I played this game pretty recently in the grand scheme of things. I honestly can't remember how I got exposed to this game. I think I just saw the cover art, heard its premise, and then bought it. I didn't even watch the trailers or look at the images much. That is how certain I was that I'd like this game. And I did! It's an extremely good game, in fact. It's the whole reason I'm making a video on it right now. So basically, the game starts like this. You wake up, but unlike most of the times you wake up, you're underwater and drowning. This isn't good. White says some pretty coherent and articulated things about past regrets and setting things right, despite the fact that he's fully underwater and with a bunch of other dead guys. And then he surfaces and he's all like, "Whoa, the three people that don't look the exact same as the other dozens of people here seem kind of familiar." And now I'm just gonna play out the first few lines of dialogue between these two people because I really like their voice acting.
Neons, rejoice, for you've arrived in glorious heaven. What?
And basically after that they give White his mask that makes him evil and edgy, and then you're told to go forth and slay demons while making your way to a place called the Glass Port. Okay, that's pretty much everything you need to know off the bat. Oh, and also taking your mask off makes you instantly explode. So the first thing you're probably going to think when you get into the game is, wow, this game has got some nice art direction, and yeah, it does! The Glass Port as a whole is a great introductory level for the game. The whole place is decorated with these pristine temple-ish things around every corner. And the titular glass ocean has this pretty marbly texture and creates these beautiful reflections of all the buildings placed on them. There's this massive island in the sky visible at all points throughout the chapter, and just look at how blue the sky is, oh my god. While on the subject, Neon White is an absolutely great example of a game that's pretty despite having minimal props or decorations through great art design and usage of pre-existing assets. And another aspect of this game that I'm going to need to mention immediately is its original soundtrack fully composed by Machine Girl. A musician who I, up until playing this game, had never heard of, and one that I'm quite a big fan of after having played this game. There really isn't much plot development that goes on when playing through the courses, so the music exists solely to keep you engaged and provide some energetic tunes that go along with the fast-paced gameplay. Speaking of the gameplay, one of the first things I thought when playing Neon White for the first time was, this game has a pretty slow walking speed for a game designed around being fast. But what I didn't realize at that point was that this is not only intentional, but also extremely beneficial to the game as a whole. The core game mechanic that everything else is centered around is the usage of soul cards, which are fired as guns, but have special usages when torn apart. While throwing away all your weapons so you can jump a second time midair or go a little bit faster is typically a terrible idea in most situations where physical manifestations of demons want to kill you, things work a little bit differently here. So here, take this example of fighting a demon in Doom. And here's an example of fighting a demon in Neon White. Boy, that cherry-picked example sure did wonders in proving my point, did it not? Look, what I'm trying to say is that the demons are a little more than targets you need to hit, and that the gameplay of Neon White is less focused on the combat, and more focused on the unbridled joy of zipping around exquisitely designed and beautifully laid out levels as fast as you can while a bunch of sound effects play at the same time and make you feel like your brain is melting. For example. Oh yeah, that's the good stuff. Okay, so basically you meet this guy called Yellow because he's wearing partially yellow clothing and he's all like, "Dude, it's me, bro! Oh man, is it good to see you again! This is so sweet! Dude, it's been so long, I thought you died during that ice skating incident back in my car." And White's just all like, "Sure, buddy, whatever you say." And then you meet this other character that's called Violet because she's purple and she's all like, "It's me! Do you remember me? Oh, you don't? Can you pretty please show me how to operate a Beretta M9 semi-automatic pistol, please, please, please?" And White's all like, "Sure, I guess," and then she shoots a black screen a bunch. You know, I hate how much of this game's dialogue reminds me of the dialogue I wrote for Clone Crisis. The stilted, awkward conversations that constantly make you wonder if it was written ironically or not, where you're constantly asking, was this supposed to be partially painful to read through? You also might notice that I'm kind of summarizing most of the story so far. That's because most of the story moments in the middle of chapters are just fillerish dialogue meant to serve as a little break in the gameplay, between lots of fast-paced action. Most chapters follow the formula of exposition before the gameplay begins, some irrelevant dialogue throughout, and then a bigger plot moment at the end of each chapter and all the levels have been cleared. I've seen this as one of the most common complaints about this game, but the dialogue that plays mid-chapter has pretty much no impact on the story and you can skip it all without much issue. Now, the amount of dialogue is one of a few complaints people have, but we can get back to that at a later point. And yes, all the neons are identified by their color, except some of the other neons which have no identifiable colors. This is because the developer is a hack fraud. Right, so white is white. Okay, they're all white. It's never actually explained why this is. You know, the character design's based around a single signature color reminds me of... Actually, I can't remember. Whatever. The glass port is functionally a glorified tutorial chapter, but I like it so much it honestly feels a bit rude to call it a glorified tutorial, but I'm doing it anyways! Here, I'll be listing each new mechanic introduced in this chapter. This chapter's introduced mechanics are... Okay, well, some of those are pretty general, so I'm going to be going over the important ones. All the demons are introduced one at a time with their own levels. Walking on the glass ocean gives you a speed boost. This is continued off the ground with these things that I'll be calling stream paths. Each new weapon and its discard ability is introduced with their own unique level. Neon White is really good at demonstrating how most of the enemies and mechanics work without explicitly telling you, which is kind of funny with how much tutorializing is going on here, but I swear this is pretty much the one exception to that. The first chapter ends with White meeting up with everyone else, and there's also another character that I forgot to mention who's called Red because she has red hair. Her only discernible character traits are being mysterious, flirty, and having a massive rifle that I think gets used in exactly one scene throughout the entire game. Everyone goes on a boat to somewhere else. A new guy called Green because of the color of his pants is introduced, and everyone's saying things like, "Wow, he's so imposing!" And I'm thinking, yeah, it's probably the overbearingly loud electronic hardcore music playing in the background. So after that, you're introduced to the hub area. Basically, this is where you can give gifts you found, other characters for bonus levels, and additional story stuff. Also, check this out. Each area in the hub has its own song made for it. It's not really too important in the slightest, but I find it nice. Also, this game's entire soundtrack was made by one artist, which is quite impressive. And I honestly just wish someone could maybe get Death Grips to do the same. From now on, practically every chapter of the game starts with you talking to this cigar-smoking cartoon cat called Mikey. Most of what he says is completely unimportant and it's just dialogue akin to, "Alright kid, I need you to go and kill more demons in this place so we can progress the plot." I'm not really going to be talking about the story for most of the video, as a video where I go along and paraphrase what happens, and the plot is going to be a lot less enjoyable than a video where I fawn over the game's best aspects. So one of those first aspects that I'd like to talk about again is the visual design. The levels in Neon White are mostly very linear and obviously just courses for you to jump around in. While it doesn't try at all to make the levels feel like real places, it does do an incredible job of set dressing and making each level a visual treat to look at. White is honestly a great color, shade, and I love it when games use it well. Another example that I see a lot of people talk about is the Mirror's Edge series. Look! Look at how clean everything looks. See how the cool blue shadows make all the interiors look so calm? Or how well it contrasts the vibrant blue sky and the greenery found throughout the place? And here, let me count every decor item found throughout the entire level. There's this bust, and this tree, and this shield. and this lamp, and this sofa, and this bus. Wait, I think I already mentioned that one. And this table, and this other pot. Okay, maybe there were more than I thought, but my point is, look at the architecture. There, that's what I was trying to say, is that even with a minimal amount of decorative objects, the courses still look great through beautiful layouts and intricate designs for most of the buildings you're running through. Also, the gameplay. I really haven't had much time to just put up some footage in the background with all the different things I've mentioned so far, so hopefully the little bit you've seen over the past minute or so is conveying just how smooth this game feels to play. I would 100% recommend buying this game if you can spare the cash, except for if you live in Pakistan, because it violates your anti-heresy laws over there and you'd be sentenced to death for playing it. The game's voice actors and developers might also want to not go there, since they too could be given the death penalty, so... And no, I'm not kidding. If any of my large viewer base in Pakistan has any other cool facts, be sure to list them in the comments. Right, so this is the hard part. Every time I've opened the script so far and wanted to write more, all that comes to mind is just me gushing over every aspect. I look at this file and all I can think of is to go, oh yeah, and here's this other part that I think is really cool. I mean, wow, isn't that awesome? This is literally the best game ever made. But that's generally not the kind of script that works for videos like these. So I'm going to be trying to be balancing out my unabashed love for this game with actual writing and explanation. So right, the gameplay. The feel, the general game feel, absolutely incredible. I can't think of many other games I've played that feel this fluid and good to move around, and every jump, every dash, every fireball, every card feels so satisfying to use. I remember thinking that the movement was a bit odd when I first played. The way you can go from strafing to the right to strafing to the left instantly without a loss in momentum threw off what I was used to in a lot of other games. While it might seem a bit unpolished at first, this is actually great for the game because it's literally just giving you more control. And check this out. White's collision box is so small. In lots of platforming games, I'll have a moment where I think I've lined up a jump perfectly only to get caught on a wall because my collision box is a bit larger than my character's visuals. Not here! In all my time playing Neon White, I can confidently say that I've never clipped into a wall or ledge or caught myself on a random bit of wall sticking out. The slip and slides, or whatever the hell I called them earlier, are another personal favorite of mine. Landing up a dash into one of these just feels so slick. And speaking of slick, god damn did they give this game style in pretty much every place they could think of. The UI elements are all so stylish. The cards, the score screen, the health display, the pre-rendered backgrounds for the hub areas, it all looks so good. So right, the first third or so of the game takes place in Lower Heaven. It's all in an architectural style that I wish I was smart enough to name, but after 10 or so minutes of going through Wikipedia pages on sacred architecture and church styles, I'm just gonna say looks relatively Roman. I mean, at least some of these images match up with what we see in the game. The levels in this part tend to be the game's simplest and shortest, which is a perfect introduction to the game's mechanics and main gameplay loop of perfecting your performance. It also makes for a lower pressure experience than a lot of other games, since if you fuck up really bad, you only need to go back 10 or 20 seconds. How nice is that? And you want to know what else is nice? It takes, I don't know, half a second to restart the level and try again. Which is incredible, because you're probably going to be doing that a lot. On the subject of another jumping heavy game, something that endlessly pissed me off about Super Mario Maker was how long it took to reset when you died. You fall off the map, right? And then Mario's like, fuck! And then he dies, and then a little ditty plays, and then it shows you where everyone else died, then it fades to black, and then, and only then, you're plopped back at the start of the level. What the hell? Like, come on, Nintendo, you've been making Marios for close to 4 decades at this point, and restarting the level takes the same amount of time my grandma spends getting her daily Bible verses online. So yes, I think that's another thing this game does exceptionally well. Quality of life and general user experience stuff. I won't go into detail on that because it's more suited to an in-depth review and less whatever the hell this kind of video is, but it's just there. Well, maybe 1 or 2 exceptions we'll get to later. There are 3 chapters of this game set in Lower Heaven, and they're all primarily focused on their respective soul cards. Chapter 1's all about using a semi-automatic rifle and dashes to get around the place, and this is extremely fun, and I like going fast and dashing into the blue guys. The second has you using an SMG and stomping everywhere, and while stomping might not seem like the most effective way to make your way through these courses, the levels are actually really good and designed around them. The third and final chapter introduces a shotgun that also functions a bit similarly to the rifle, except you can go vertically with the boost and you move a little faster on the ground than in the air. I think. This guide I found on Steam said so. I mean, it feels like it's true. I should also mention that the Elevate, Godspeed, and Stomp cards are all dropped by the demon type sharing a color with the cards. Oh, and those are the actual names of the cards. I was just referring to them as the gun types they show on the front. Enemies, with a few notable exceptions, are practically cannon fodder. They are mostly small and pathetic, and there are only 2 that I think pose an actual threat. The yellow thing that throws little bouncing balls at you is completely not a threat. The Blue Knight is a little tankier, and you'll need to watch out for their massive, throbbing pink thing they try and hit you with. The green guys shoot 3 projectiles that are much more likely to hit you than the other enemies, but you'll only take damage from one of these pellets if all of them hit you. In the second Lower Heaven chapter, you also get introduced to these guys, the Guardians. They're one of the 2 demons in the entire game that pose much of a threat to you. Basically, once you get close enough, they'll lock onto you and charge up a laser that instantly kills you if you don't kill them or get out of their range or sight. They're quite terrifying to go up against at first because of this and their larger health amount, but they're used quite thoughtfully and aren't used to massively screw you over a majority of the time. This level is also a great example of the game showing you its mechanics through gameplay. Here's the first Guardian. Note how most first-time players will walk around it and notice that the beams stop it from killing you with the laser. You can also try to shoot it, but you don't have enough ammo to kill it. However, once you reach the top of the stairs and grab the rifle, you'll most likely fire the bomb at the Guardian to break the surface it's standing on top of, which instantly kills it in the process. There are 4 more in the level, all positioned in ways that encourage you to use the bombs on them. This one in front of the wall, this one in a spot that you can boost yourself up, and these 2 at the end. There are a lot of them, as when the player fires a bomb at the first one, they might have damaged it beforehand and will not learn that the bomb instantly kills them regardless of their health. The rest of them are placed in situations further incentivizing the player to blow them up, culminating in the last encounter where you have 1 weapon, 2 Guardians, and not enough time or ammo to shoot both of them and break open the gate. See what I mean? It naturally gets the player to use the new mechanic, and then the rest of the level is spent clarifying and reinforcing that mechanic to make it clear to people that might have done things odd their first time. Anyways, sorry about that. I know that's not quite as exciting as you'd expect a video covering a game about killing demons with sick parkour moves to be, but I felt that it was something that needed to be highlighted and praised. So, let's get back to the game's best and most exciting aspect, the story! So most of this chapter is White shooting things, and Yellow's also there, and they talk about eating chili and drinking beer and stuff. And this whole time White's thinking, wow, this guy is a moron, and also I really don't know if I can trust him. And to answer these questions, yes, he is a moron, and yes, he is to be trusted. Most chapters end with a sermon where these 2 guys talk a lot about the state of the competition and White gets some time to talk to his buds. Before the next gameplay section, you go to Mikey, who I think I mentioned earlier, and he tells you where you're going again for the next level while offering advice. But first you have to talk to his secretary and oh, is that a rare ticket? I hope I get new or super rare. Come on, come on. Oh, it's fucking on me OG Cat again. Honestly, when I first played this game, I remember being really relieved when it came to the story because I thought the writing would be much worse than it is due to people saying it was the worst writing ever. And yes, it's pretty iffy in some spots. I think there were about 7 lines in the script I physically recoiled at during my first playthrough. I was expecting the story to read like a webcomic written by the bastard child of Hayes from Anonymous Agony and Tina from Bob's Burgers, but I found myself really enjoying it. So I'm honestly not sure what's up with that. I saw one guy say it had the worst writing out of any piece of media they ever viewed ever over like 30 or so years. Maybe everyone else was being a bit harsher than necessary, or maybe I just so happened to be this game's exact pinpoint target audience. Am I? Cringe? Anyways, tying in both to the gameplay and the story, I feel like now is a good time to mention the collectible gifts for each character. Each giftable character has 1 gift you can give them, however you can give them the same gift many times. Basically, each level has a gift for a certain character and a secret spot for you to find. This might sound terrible at first, because looking for secrets in shooter games might bring up some images of looking under every crate and pressing the interact button against every wall, but it's actually done really well here. Can you see that gift? I mean, hopefully the answer is yes. It's right out in the open. Most of the gifts are hidden in plain sight. You're not going to be needing to spend a half hour on every level looking for unlocked doors or walls you can walk through. The challenge is getting to them. In some levels, you'll be looking for a specific path or route you can take to get to a gift. However, most of the time you'll be saving up your soul cards and visiting different parts of the level or out of order to get to tricky spots. In a lot of other games, secret hunting can feel like a chore implemented to pad out a game's length or add extra prerequisites to doing well. Here, it's legitimately fun. The slower pace of this provides a nice break from the breakneck action of the rest of the game, and the puzzles add variety through flipping a central game mechanic on its head. So over the course of each game, I've been collecting every gift, as you can exchange them for extra dialogue and levels. I do find it kind of funny how extra dialogue is considered a reward with how this game's written, but whatever. I'm sure that turned a lot of people off of getting these. I also can't help but wonder who out there is climbing up on top of cranes and leaving perfume bottles on them for some reason. So Yellow's gift of choice throughout the game is a 6-pack of generic beer. Alcohol in Heaven is a bit of a surprise, as people have had a lot of arguments over it in history, but whatever. You give a character enough gifts, and you'll get to the next insight level. These alternate between cutscenes and bonus levels. The bonus levels are quite well done as well, actually. Red, Yellow, and Violet's levels all have their own gimmicks based around the characters they belong to. Yellow's levels disable all of the discard abilities for the soul cards and are primarily focused around using things like explosive barrels or exploiting your lack of movement abilities. All of Red's levels are focused on a single card that changes each level, and Violet's levels are more difficult and focused around avoiding a bunch of spikes or dangerous elevators? But mostly spikes. This is another aspect of the game that's great. Using the bonus levels is a way to do things that wouldn't fit into the core gameplay loop. Using the bonus levels as a way to do things that wouldn't fit into the core gameplay allows the developers to try out new and interesting ideas without deviating too much from what the game's based around or adding gimmicks to the main plot. Right, so I've already grabbed all the gifts, so Yellow's getting 9 6-packs today. I hope he doesn't drink them all at once. So right now Yellow's gone somewhere else, so it's just White and Violet. She says that Yellow's probably trying to manipulate White since he lacks a memory of the past, and then there's a flashback to something that happened 10 minutes ago.
I'd give my left nut to go back and do it all over again. Even all the weird stuff at the end.
But I guess it's good that they put that in, since I didn't actually show that part earlier. And then Red shows up and she and Violet fight for some reason.
Oh, this is fun, Vi. Whoops. Almost got hit that time.
Stay still, damn it!
I'm gonna head out.
After a few more levels, you meet up with Violet again, and there's more questionable dialogue. But eventually she says, yeah, also there's this spooky abandoned place, and there might be some cool stuff that could help you win the competition, and also you need to kill Yellow. Also, Yellow knows about this place and seems pretty enthusiastic about going.
Oh, that reminds me. Someone told me about this place where you can find God's old AK-47s or something.
White brings this place up to Mikey. Mikey's like, what the hell is wrong with you? That's gotta be the dumbest place to go ever. That place is totally unsafe, and also Green's there, and you're absolutely gonna die if you go there.
Aw, this place is mad scary, dude.
They go anyways. Yellow, now completely drunk off his ass from the 54 beers I gave him, dies unceremoniously. Because Green impaled him with a spear. Which is actually quite ceremonious, but dies ceremoniously isn't really as funny. Poor guy died so early into the plot he didn't even get featured in the promo art. The fight with the strong buff guy goes as expected, and by goes as expected I mean he flies around the place and summons a bunch of crystals for you to shoot to lower his force field, so it's closer to a normal level than a boss fight than you'd see in other games. I'd also like to mention the tension going on here. Not the, like, nervousness kind. I mean the sexual kind, that kind of tension. So you go up this clock tower while shooting Green a bunch and then he falls over. White will also just stand there and breathe heavily for as long as you wait, so that's interesting. So back at the sermon, everything is normal except for the fact that Yellow's death is pinned on White, everyone thinks he's the killer, and Violet's kinda pissed that he didn't actually kill Yellow. Neat. White goes to Mikey and Mikey's all like, oh, tough shit. What voice did I do for Mikey? Tough shit, kid. How about you go and kill some more demons? I decide to go to a beach to unwind, but there's not actually anything you can do besides look at the water. So this chapter is a relatively standard affair. A nice little detail that I like in all the lower heaven levels is how each chapter that takes place here has different weather and lighting. This is my personal favorite of the three. The red foliage and dark stormy sky mixed with the purple water paths is beautiful. Violet's gone, and Red shows up at the end and says that basically Green's halo makes him more powerful, but also has a side effect of making him completely insane, something that would happen to anyone that gets the halo for that amount of time. Red mentions that the competition is pretty obviously a scam and says there's a cool book that they should try and find because reading is a great hobby with many benefits. This will also help them win the competition somehow. White goes back to Mikey and they say more things that really aren't interesting enough to mention besides going to the Hanging Gardens. They're quite pretty and also filled with a bunch of tripwires Violet set up that will instantly kill you if you step through them. I'm not any better at identifying styles, but a lot of the buildings in the background reminded me of the temples you'd see left over from old civilizations in South America. The levels in the Hanging Gardens are a lot larger in scale than the lower heaven levels, but also filled with a bunch of soul cards and stream paths to use. It also introduces these silly little guys. You jump on them and you get boosted in a specific direction as they violently explode behind you. The levels are larger, but their layouts are still relatively forgiving and give you a decent margin for error if you're trying to get the best times on each level. Personally, I hated getting the ace medals, not because they're not fun to get, but because it means you're closer to finishing every aspect of the game. I was a bit worried when I started playing this game that I wouldn't really want to spend time trying to get faster times, especially because I don't like using leaderboards much and didn't have friends to compare my times to. But I was surprised by how thrilling it was to go back and keep trying to beat my records. It might sound repetitive and frustrating to some, but trying again and again and again just to shave a millisecond off your time just feels so satisfying. You get into a state of flow with this game. At least I did. When the music is playing, everything is flying by, so you zip around the place, you're shooting all the enemies with deadly precision, and you're training your hardest to push yourself to do even a little better. That is what I would consider the best part of Neon White. It's not playing through the game for the first time or whatever, it's when you focus in and go at it again and again and again for getting as close as to perfect as you can achieve. In fact, I wasn't actually too fond of playing through levels for the first time when going for the best times. I'd spend a lot of time perfecting one route just to find another shortcut that skips half the level. I'd always feel a little bit disappointed that I spent so much time working on my method just to have it invalidated by a route that results in playing less of the game, which is honestly how most of the ace medals are found. Most of them rely on finding a shortcut that shaves a bunch of time off. It's not hard, mind you, the game will show you a shortcut for each level once your insight is raised enough from playing it. Now, back to the story. White and Red meet up again, Violet's still pissed, and... What the hell is this, 4 ellipses? I don't get it. I know it's a weird thing to point out, but like, what? Couldn't they have just done the thing where the dialogue box goes away for a second and then a sound plays to convey silence or whatever, as ironic as that may sound? So yeah, anyways, he meets up with Violet a little bit later, she accuses Red of being a traitor or whatever, and then she says, oh yeah, basically Green was our boss back before we were all dead. The next day, White shows up to the Hanging Gardens again, and Green is already there, and has begun murdering people without waiting for him, which is quite rude. They also make some small talk. Green reveals that he was actually White's boss, and then White threatens to violate him with a sword. For this section, White's chasing Green throughout the place, but ooh, look at that! Bubbles! They look quite diseased, and like stepping inside one would give you cancer, but they're still quite fun to pop. They also stop any projectiles from hitting what's inside them. So now White's caught up to Green again. Whoa, okay, that was fast. Where am I? And then he hits a black screen. So we've moved from guns onto hitting the black screen with swords. Why does everyone keep shooting black screens? What do they have against them? I think they're nice. They're one of my editing staples. Red shows up and is all like, don't worry, White, I'm saving you! And then she gets strangled, and Green says to go to a place called Heaven's Edge. Cool. She then practically describes everything White really should have picked up on from his conversations he had over the past few days. So basically, Green was their boss, he had a thing for White, and he manipulated him and everyone else into going on a suicide revenge mission. Also of note on this chapter's final level is a secret path that takes you to a mysterious dream realm, characterized by the typical floating, broken islands and appearing platforms. This leads you to one of Green's secret private pools and a comically oversized coin. Yes, a dream sequence where you jump around floating islands had to be included. I now feel 100% confident in the fact that they're just trying to check off every trope on the list. Sermon time! Why are there so many ellipses? 18! I count 18! Why? Was this an inside joke from the developers or something? I legitimately don't get why they had so many. Like, is that supposed to convey him being, like, silent for 30 seconds? Whatever. Anyways, we can use this time to give out more gifts. Despite his death, we can continue to decorate Yellow's burial site with bottles of alcohol to appease his spirit. One of the funniest things about this game is how most of the best dialogue is hidden behind the secrets and side content, which most people aren't going to want to unlock since most people found the dialogue grating. So why would they go out of their way to find more of it? It's weird, I know, but I found a lot of these bonus scenes to be quite enjoyable. They do a good job at fleshing out the characters without bogging down the story's pace with unnecessary dialogue. Throughout the game, White is definitely not as lively as the rest of the cast, and that's not really a bad thing. He still has his moments and lines that stick out, but I appreciate the writers deciding to write him in a manner that would make him a little bit less grating to a lot of people. I mean, he is the main character after all, you're gonna be seeing a lot of him. So, moving on to the next area, Heaven's Edge is a pretty cool place. The massive towers of glass and concrete make for quite a contrast to all the temples and religious buildings that make up the rest of the game. These levels are also massive. I mean, just absolutely huge. The gaps between buildings that you jump across are big enough to fit entire levels from Lower Heaven in. But there's also a rocket launcher that the game introduces for this chapter. Well, a dual rocket launcher grappling hook thing. So that's two of the most fun movement mechanics in games bundled into one. So yes, the rockets are great. Can blow up entire groups of enemies with a single projectile, use well-timed blasts to make large jumps, or press yourself up against a wall and fire them automatically to scale massive buildings in seconds. A little bit later into the chapter, Red and White find a page of a book and say, yeah, I guess we should keep going in the direction this came from. Now, on the topic of gameplay, one extremely important aspect of Neon White's design is that everything is cumulative. Once a mechanic is introduced, it'll be there until the end of the game. Chapters aren't based around exclusive gimmicks that you use a few times and then never again. Once the shotgun is introduced, it's in the game until the end. The bounce pads and the mimic chests that I forgot to add to the script aren't only a Hanging Gardens thing. They're a staple of the levels from then on. This is another thing that makes the game so satisfying. It keeps building on itself and adding new things that complement everything else until the end. It doesn't introduce fun mechanics and then take them away and introduce something else for the next chapter. Neon White isn't a particularly difficult game either. The challenge comes from beating your previous records and perfecting your times. I think this was a great choice. For a game designed around competition and perfection, it's quite accessible and easy to get into. The core mechanics are quite simple and the medals needed to progress aren't terribly demanding. Passing and even getting the better medals isn't too difficult in most cases, which I like. The game's baseline difficulty is accessible and forgiving, but it can get as challenging as you want it to be depending on how much you plan on pushing yourself and your abilities. The chapter ends when Mikey shows up and there's this big plot moment that, just like the game's opening, I'll summarize in a way that's much less interesting. So basically, during the 10 Days of Judgment, God would write all the names of the deceased either into the Book of Life or the Book of Death. Some of the dead guys were so disappointed with heaven that they tried to kill God and made their own heaven with margaritas and eco-friendly wood veneers. And those are the blue guys that you see throughout the game. People in the Book of Death come up to heaven as monsters during the 10 Days of Judgment as demons, and the Book of Life was hidden after all that stuff went down, and that was the book that the random page they found belongs to, and that's basically everything. So naturally, White and Red set off to find the book using the page's guidance since it glows the brightest when facing the rest of the book. Kind of like a paper metal detector that finds apocryphal texts instead of things like buttons and old coins. They might be worth more due to rarity, but selling holy artifacts at a pawn shop is probably a cardinal sin. Anyways, I really like this chapter. It doesn't introduce any new enemies or mechanics, but the level designs are sprawling and filled with the brim with cards and fun obstacles, and the chapter as a whole really makes you feel like you're in the home stretch. There isn't much dialogue to get into the way of things, so coupled with the larger levels and the sparse conversations, it's one of the heaviest gameplay to story chapters, which is not a bad thing at all. So a little bit later, the chapter ends with a really neat level set inside a castle. I'm not exactly sure why it's a castle, but it's cool and a fitting conclusion, and I wanted to mention it. Red, White, and Violet, on top of sounding like a pretty sweet band name, all take a break on top of the castle. Things are nice. Red brought everyone desserts, and they're all getting along pretty well. Violet apologizes for being kind of a shithead the entire game, and then stabs White in the gut and steals his page. Oh yeah, and then he gets a vision from God that tells him to go to this specific temple, which is really convenient for the plot and makes things quite a bit easier. It is actually kind of mind-boggling how many of the same story beats this shares with Clone Crisis, and I don't know how I should feel about that. The extremely questionable meme writing, the completely random backstabbings, the death of a character that's maybe supposed to be taken seriously or not, the shoehorned messy romance. I don't know whether I should commend myself for having indie game tier writing or if I should criticize Angel Matrix for making a game with a plot that mirrors that of a shitpost. Speaking of the game's story as a whole, the plot is there. It's not incredible. The premise is great, and it could have been just the premise. You know, only a bunch of people competing for a spot in heaven. But it wasn't. Over the course of the game, things deviate a bunch from that simple setup and things get a lot more complicated and wacky. Whether this is a pro or a con, it's up to you. Undeniably, it definitely nails the feel of a shoddy quality early 2000s low-budget Toonami English dub that you could mistake for a fever dream. And you know what? I'm not gonna sit here and pretend I don't love it. Yes, it's dumb, self-indulgent, and about as T for teen as video games can get. But I actually kind of enjoyed going back and finding all the memories. Slowly piecing together the story before it flat out tells you all of it is fun, yet I do wonder why they reveal it as some sort of big twist when the flavor text on the bottom left of the screen literally tells you one of the major plot points from the beginning of the game. Yes, the dialogue is off in a lot of places. You can go on YouTube and find compilations of the game's most interesting lines. But it's fun. I don't care if it's cringe or cliche webcomic tier writing. You know why? Because it's fun. Because it's unique and different and does something rather than being boring and intentionally sterile and bland as to not throw people off and get larger market appeal. I'd rather have a delicious red velvet cake with cream cheese frosting that's a bit off and tastes slightly sour than a slice of white bread for dessert. Because in a world of so many games that don't do anything with their premises or settings, I will respect a developer that goes out of their way to make something unique and heartfelt 1,000 times over those that keep recycling the same plots, even if the writing ends up alienating some people and getting the developers some shit. Going for the high dive and failing is 10 times more commendable than never entering the pool at all, you know? Yes, the characters are simple. Yellow is the stereotypical dumb bro guy that's best friends with the protagonist, Red's a generic, flirty, and mysterious love interest, and Violet is literally an e-girl. It is not groundbreaking. It's not trying to be something that it isn't. It knows what it's the plot to, and it'll play that role as well as it possibly can. So yes, I love it. Not just because I have bad taste, not just because I'm young, arrogant, and hate everything mainstream, but because I love it when creators make what they want, not what social media trends say is popular or profitable. So there. Okay, so suddenly White gets better. Yay. Basically, he goes to Mikey and Red and says, guys, God told me to go to this place where we can end the game's story in a timely manner that would also fit this plot into a standard 12-episode TV show. And then the other two are like, that's quite a meta and shoehorned way to advance the plot even for this game, but I guess that works. I didn't even need to summarize that, they really just said, wow, we're here. This level is really pretty and would normally take a few minutes to walk through, but there's a jump you can do here that allows you to skip 3/4 of it. Whoops. And there's another one of those green portals here. Oh, are we doing this again? Yeah, we're doing this again. Right, so I should actually mention what the coins are for. Much like how you can give gifts to the other characters for side levels, conversations, and memories, you can toss these coins into the ocean to get memories of White's history with Green. I haven't really touched on any of the memories, as I'm quite fond of how they're used as plot moments and don't really want to go into too much detail on them in this video in case viewers haven't played this game before. Which isn't terribly likely, since when you're just starting out as a YouTuber, people generally click on your videos because they like the topic or the game you're covering, not because they like the channel. But I digress. I know a majority of the people here couldn't care less about the plot, but I like these parts of the story and found them well done enough to warrant letting people see them on their own. Besides, it's not like you can't just look up a different video on the game if you really want to see them. Back to the present, White and Red find the book. That was easy. Never mind. So Violet shows up and blows up the temple, and then Green shows up and Violet's like, "Oh, hey bestie, I got you that book you wanted so much," and Green's all like, Now, kitten, Daddy has other plans for all of you." And then he impales her, which is pretty much his definitive character trait at this point. They then talk a bit, and White threatens to violate Green with the sword a second time. Green turns down the title of Throat Goat and instead opts to try and kill White again. This fight follows the same formula as the first, except this time it's much longer and a lot more engaging because of all the new game mechanics introduced that it uses. The fight can still be beaten about 2/3 into the normal route if you hit him enough, which I find really funny. I like to imagine Green being really disappointed and like you, oh, you're really just gonna kill me here. I had another quarter mile of crystals set up around the temple I was hoping you could shoot. I was wondering if maybe you wanted to. No? Ugh, fine. Anyways, so now Green has both books and is looking to cause another biblical apocalypse and is going to leave, but then Violet shows up in her second surprise visit of the day and blows up the temple again, this time with an even bigger explosion than the first, and also the book's pages flew everywhere and the detonation happened. So it's kind of an emergency.
Attention, Neons. We are in a state of emergency.
Yeah, like that. So before we enter the final stretch, I figured now would be a good time to get some recreation time in. At the start of each chapter, you get these things called Heavenly Delight tickets. You can go to a kiosk in the cathedral and exchange them for goodies. Well, not you specifically. You're just sitting down watching a YouTube video. In fact, I don't think you've done anything deserving of praise during the last 30 minutes or so that you've been watching this. Either way, you can use these tickets in exchange for more bonus scenes where you get to watch White go and do things. This is my second playthrough of the game, and I'd saved all of them up until now to get all the footage easily. I was gonna do this really funny bit. Well, there were gonna be two funny bits. The first is where I look at the card and say, I hope that microphone means karaoke. And then when they do karaoke, I was gonna do my best impression of Steve Blum singing Baka Mitai from the hit game series Yakuza. However, what I wasn't aware of is that these scenes play out differently depending on what part of the story you're in. The first delight is ice cream, which White would normally eat with Yellow if this were done earlier in the game. So now White is all depressed and saying, I sure wish my good pal Yellow was here for this, and I didn't think that would be too big of a deal until I realized Violet is also dead, which means a lot of the other scenes are gonna play out differently, including karaoke. This is what that scene looks like when all of White's friends are dead. So I apologize, dear viewer, for ruining the opportunity to perform what easily could have been the funniest bit in Autumn 22 channel history. Not that there's much history, as it's my 6th video on a game, but still a pretty commendable title, as pretty much everything I make is hilarious. Here's 5 seconds of Green and White grilling burgers in silence to make up for it. Okay, so back to the Doomsday stuff going on. I'm not even gonna summarize the conversation with Mikey because honestly, who even gives a shit? Basically, everything is in ruin now and White needs to use the page of the book's power to instantly teleport himself around the place. Don't ask how it works. I've skipped through 7 hours of footage today and can't be asked to find the one specific line where it's explained. This whole section is great, no complaints, except I think the visuals look a little bit iffy, so I guess that makes one complaint. They're the longest and most chaotic out of the entire game, which makes a bunch of sense when you factor in the teleportation. They're also very easy to skip a majority of due to how open they are. Watch this. Soup! That's half the level done. The rest of the chapter plays out the same way. White actually gets all the pages and everything goes well, for realsies this time. Oh, and also Red's here. Anyways, in terms of bad news, the books are worthless without a pen to write in them with, which makes sense. And also the pen is currently being literally held in one of God's hands. Also, Mikey basically explains that heaven is pretty much a snow globe and that said hand is beneath the snow globe and they're gonna need to crack open a hole in the bottom to get his hand through. Right, so now this is actually Judgment Day, not earlier in the plot. Whoops. So basically, Red, White, and Green all meet up at the glass port again. Green unveils his plan to genocide literally everyone in the universe. They all talk about how none of them know how they're gonna get the pen out of God's hand, and then Green says, hey, what if one of us took off our mask and then just exploded the snow globe? And White's all like, well, it's certainly not gonna be me, but Green is also saying, nuh-uh, I'm definitely not blowing myself up for this. Then Red says, hey, what if I just blew myself up instead? White then chases Red to the Coliseum, which probably only speeds her up. And then she explodes.
No scoped it.
Just kidding, we're actually finishing the game this time. This part is kinda hard to write for because I'm not really sure how to make this fight too interesting beyond just describing what's happening, and I can't think of any funny metaphors or whatever to spice things up with. I had this one bit written down where White says, "Oh, it's time to white my wrong," but it wasn't too funny, and then I thought, oh, what if there was a bit where it said he said, "I'm gonna send you to greener pastures," but that one wasn't funny either. You see, there were actually a lot of these I had written down. I thought it would be funny if there was one line where after stealing the book, right, Violet would say, "I read you like a book," you know, as a reference to the color red. Or then maybe she'd stab White and then say something like, "You shouldn't have overlooked past my violet tendencies," you know. But that wasn't really funny either, so I guess I just decided that I didn't really need to do any of those. No, I did not do a jump cut there. That's literally what happens. So then White effectively says, did I really just save heaven?" And yeah, that's it. That's the game. Pretty good. If you're watching this the day it came out, Merry Christmas. No, actually, no. If you're watching this the day it came out, I'm sorry. Because if you're watching this on Christmas, you probably don't have anything better to be doing. I hope things improve for you in the immediate future.